Okay, can I have everyone's attention, please? We're going to get started today. Welcome. My name is Angie Dick. I'm an instructional designer with the College of Ag and ETS, and I'm here today to just welcome everybody. So welcome. And introduce our presenters. So I hope you had a great morning thus far. It was an awesome presentation. Who enjoyed the presentation this morning? Yeah, it was a great presentation. Kudos to the planning committee for the symposium. I'm delighted to introduce the session titled Global Communications Pedagogy as Hybridized Collaborative Engagements. And our presenter for this session is Dr. Michael Elavsky. And with Dr. Elavsky, he is an assistant professor of the College of Communications here at University Park. So if you don't know him, awesome presenter, seen him last year. And with him today, he has Janelle Applequest and David Moore, which are doctoral students at Penn State College of Communications, and an integral part of Dr. Elavsky's work. So you may have seen Dr. Elavsky, like I said, last year, his presentation, You Can't Go Back Now, Social Media and Democracy, in a large lecture format at the symposium, or you may have seen his presentation at the 2011 summer camp. But something if you don't know, last year in 2011, he was also a faculty fellow, and his focus of interest is global communication and pedagogy, just like the title. So without further ado, I'd like to let Janelle, David, and Dr. Elavsky speak.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Can you hear me? Everything's okay? Okay, good. That's a mouthful as a title. And again, I'm very happy to have David and Janelle be a part of this morning because they're actually an integral part of this course. Last year, I was talking about Communications 110, which is a 300-person general education, media, and democracy class. This semester, we've, with the help of the group who are sitting up in front here, especially Cole Camp, we've been able to develop another idea that I had, which is about sort of engaged, linked learning internationally, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we talk about global communication pedagogy as hybridized collaborative engagements. It's a mouthful, but I think by the end of the presentation, I hope that you'll have an understanding of what we're talking about, and that's to say, we're looking at a collaborative, collective, engaged classroom that spans the Atlantic Ocean, and I think without further ado, I'll just get into the presentation, and then hopefully by the end of this will be completely clear in terms of what we're talking about. First of all, Czech associations. We are doing a class now, it's COMM 419, Comparative Media Studies, that is linked with a class at Charles University in the Czech Republic. How did this happen? Well, I have my own Czech associations, and that's to say in 1996 I went abroad for 6 months to try and figure out some things about grad school. I ended up staying for 3 years and came back with my dissertation project, came back with the woman who would eventually be my wife, who's also a professor here at Penn State. She's dying to go back home. And we also basically had a real important connection in terms of opening up my eyes to a larger world in ways that the classroom never was able to do. And I've always said to myself, even though we did do a linked class back in the day in 1997 of IRC chats, I always said, if I get the opportunity, I want to do a class that takes it to the next level. So what we did, again, by going into the Czech Republic, meaning me, we basically had this opportunity to explore what happens in terms of learning in real terms, so that you get partial pictures of countries that then come into focus basically in the ways you open your eyes to learning in every day. I think that's what we're all trying to do in terms of the classroom, trying to open it up in a way that it becomes more real. Now, one of the things that's been absolutely essential to my thinking is the ways in which travel opens up your eyes not only about the world, but also about where you come from. So I have two quotes up here, Henry Miller and Mark Twain. One's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And that second quote absolutely underscores what I'm invested in, which is to open up the students' thinking to the possibilities not only about their own cultural box, but about getting past any sort of myopic or xenophobic approaches they have to the world. And it's always surprising to me at Penn State how many students in many ways still harbor these sort of reticent about learning about the world. So we just replaced this idea with travel, although we don't necessarily do it completely in 419. But the idea is to get you to think beyond the classroom as we have traditionally conceived it. Not us in this room, but I would still say in general. So what we end up doing is teaching what I call in and for the real world of experience. We all know that new media is very helpful for connecting to the students in ways that are very visceral. It allows them to have a connection to their real world experience, and in a very important way then ultimately connect with us about what we're trying to teach them, right? To make them to move beyond traditional ideas of knowledge that then become collaborative. So when I talk about teaching in and for the real world, my goal in this class is to actually give them a set of skills and a set of experiences that then will transform not only how they see their professional development, but my goal is ultimately, because I think small, to see how they change the world. Right? So the mission and intentions become very, very important. What are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to bring that similar sort of awareness and excitement that I had in the Czech Republic to the students, viscerally. Allow them to see that there's ways in which they can learn, they can invest themselves in it, and make it real. The foundations, for me, are about challenging their conceptions of what a classroom is. I mean, that's why we're all here, right? Trying to find a way to say, how do we use this media and creative thinking to make this more meaningful and to move beyond the foundations traditionally of, take a test, get your information, move on, you've now been educated. And of course, the scholarly and pedagogical import for me stems from the fact that I wanted to sort of say, I'm not inventing the wheel here by any means. But what I'm trying to do is say, who's done what previously, and how can we sort of augment it in particular ways so that I can contribute something to this larger idea that, again, is not my own. In looking at the research, and I give Janelle credit for a big part of this, what we've often been able to see is that we see the types of ideas I had for this course invested in traditionally like online learning, so there's no physical aspect to it, or self-directed projects where students are engaged on particular outcomes in relationship to international collaboration. But I didn't see a whole lot, or we didn't see a whole lot, of this idea of how do we allow the students to make the course their own in very particular ways, investments in it. And so this is where I started to say, okay, I want to find a way to create this course so that it will bring in a real world of experience for them. I mean, the goal for me is ultimately to break down their misconceptions, but also to make it fun. And an underlying theme of all the courses I teach come from this quote, which is actually a variation, but it's mine. Which is to say, the very goal of travel is not but to make sense of a foreign land and culture. It is to return home with new eyes so as to view one's own land and culture as foreign, peeling back the normative layers of our common sense. I think more than anything else, going abroad taught me that there was a lot I didn't know about America. And that's what I'm trying to convey in this classroom. Give them an opportunity to say, by speaking and working with these individuals, this is going to teach you a lot about America that you necessarily won't see. I call it collective, collaborative, emergent exchanges. Why? Collective, because as you'll see in the diagram in a few minutes, it's not just between me and my TAs and my students, but now we have a whole set, just like that in the Czech Republic, who are also invested in this idea of how those three sort of stands, so to speak, can contribute collectively so that we all have a new understanding of what we're trying to do, which is arguably see the world differently. Collaborative, obviously, traditionally used as the idea that the teacher gives up some authority, but now we're talking about the ways in which all of us are working together, not just myself and the students, or the students and the students, but the TAs are a part of that. I'm going to have them talk for a second about how they have contributed to the design. Emergent goes back to my point about the ways in which students, and I will expressly sort of in the next slide tell you about this, shows what they were going to study, how they were going to study, how we were going to take the ideas I wanted them to engage and make it their own. And then the exchanges come from the fact that we're now, thankfully, in a world where we don't have to RC chat anymore, although I am behind the curveball in terms of technology. I'll admit that. There's a group down here, I don't know if you heard them previously mocking me, because I've moved from PowerPoints. That's a big step from last year. But I will say this, is that we have tremendous people, thanks to Cole and others, who have given me ideas to say, hey, you don't need to know it all, but let's take your ideas creatively and let's make something happen. And so we've been able to do this. And of course, what that means is now, of course, with Google Plus or with these other issues, we have the ability for the students to collectively get together in groups and have chats on their own time and connect with the students in the Czech Republic on their own time. So all of this becomes this exciting space where we say, how do we make that premise the design for the course? Well, it starts with legwork. Putting the ducks in a row, I call it. First of all, for me, it's about practical details. I had to find an educational partner who was willing and invested to bring his own ideas about this to this design. So it started last year, thanks to the auspices of the TLT Fellowship that I received. I was in the Czech Republic for a long time, having many discussions with ultimately an individual named Thomas Tropata. And basically he is the director of Charles University College of Communications, and he was about that. Now the infrastructures, what I mean by that is we are dealing with difficult parameters. They're 6 hours ahead of us. Okay? They run their semester, it starts at the end of February. Well, I'm halfway done. All right? They meet once a week. We meet 3 times a week. Right? How are we going to connect it? Do they speak English? What types of hurdles do their students bring to this that we have to sort of think through? Well, we managed to work that through. And the idea was to say, how can we make this design work in a way that's feasible, right? On one hand, new media sets us free, but we can't get past the fact that if you don't speak the same language, not much communication is going to happen, right? Course objectives then became a big part of what do we want this to do? I mean, what do we see taking on this responsibility? Well, he saw a lot of opportunities by having their students break down ideas about America in very important ways so that they then would see the Czech Republic. So again, both of us sort of invested in a similar idea. And then, of course, it's the structure. Well, how are we going to do this? What's assessment look like, right? How do we grade for their participation? What is that participation? Do we put them on projects? So all of these sort of had to be parsed out in what we're going to do. And we have to start slowly, because you can't sort of say we're going to do this and then it's going to happen, right? But we put an idea in mind, and again, we'll talk more about this as we move forward. Ultimately, the syllabus reflects all of that. What are the readings? Well, if they're in English, can the students in the Czech Republic read them? Well, thanks to Google Translator, you can get a pretty good idea of what these readings are, right? Again, what kind of media will you use? It's a comparative media course. We can now watch streaming Czech news. You might not understand the language, but you see the gestures, you see the graphics, you see the advertisings. In the same way, they can now watch any of our news sources. So you get this opportunity for them to say, okay, you watch ABC, you watch the Czech news, you watch BBC, let's have a discussion about the different parameters that are around that. On this day, what news story was first? How did they report it? Where were the commercials? So you begin to see that even beyond the language parameters, you get an opportunity for media to open this up. Lectures was an interesting point. We can actually record them. So we have a number of guest lectures, both in the professional field and also in the academic setting, coming to talk about things like telecom policy as they compare, or coming to talk about what it means to be in a new media environment in the Czech Republic. And we record them, or in the process of recording them, and then that's the lecture for the week. They come and they talk about what it means to be in charge of basically the Czech Republic's CNN. Again, all things that I was able to put together through my own connections of now basically having worked in the Czech Republic for almost 20 years. The projects, again, we decided we didn't want to sort of tell them what to do. We wanted to have them put something together. And again, this is where TLT became very important, because we began to use SPACE. And the idea is that SPACE, if you haven't seen it, is a virtual bulletin board. Sam Richards was actually my inspiration last year with his World in Conversations project. And it's an emergent pedagogical tool, but more importantly, the students can make it their own. And ultimately, this is why I was very pleased to learn about it and embrace it. And we're still in that learning stage where they're learning and I'm learning, and we all admit we're all learning. And that's the way it goes. And of course, assessment comes down to how do we determine, is there going to be exams, is there going to be oral, all these issues that come into play. And we just decided ultimately we have to sort of do it our own way, because in order to get credit to the system, you can't change the system completely. Technologies, are they available? Well, we found out that the Czech students actually in many ways are more wired than we are, thanks to our telecom companies. And ultimately are much more on top of it, because they were able in the leap from communism to capitalism to jump over the infrastructure that's kept us from developing in many ways. So you have a very, very aware group of citizens over there who are doing it. And of course, the students, can they connect? That's what we're trying to do. So the teaching approach had to be something that we had to talk about. Well, I'm fairly outgoing. I like to use the informal settings. Europe, not so much. There are a lot more of the old mindset. Here's how we do. We lecture, you read, don't ask questions, and come and talk. So we had to work that out a little bit about how we're going to do this. So far, so good. I think things have worked out. And then, of course, the emergent course design becomes this. What is it about the students? And what we decided to do is, if we're going to compare media, why don't the students choose what they think should represent them? Choose television shows. Choose movies. Choose music. And we'll ship it over there if it's not available on the internet. So that these students then end up choosing things like Ryan Seacrest as an opportunity for understanding development of media and entertainment news. The Penn State Joe Paterno scandal as a means of understanding academics and football over here, which is not a class over there. They also took pictures of bookstores so that they could see that, you can buy pasta with Penn State logo. There are no bookstores in the Czech Republic that are selling this. So there's interesting dialogues that then open up through the choice of the students taking ownership of this. And the goal was for us each week to deal with one aspect of the media content. So it would be television one week, and of course we're in the class now, so it's ongoing. And of course the hurdles finally at the end only become culture. How do students feel about being able to engage one another in the language? We found out that the students over there have embraced English fairly well, so that their communication abilities are going to be fine. Putting them into groups would be a great idea for them to break down their ability to be frightened. So, okay, so there's 5 of us here. Google Plus allows these conversations. Ultimately, you get an opportunity where everyone gets to sort of chime in as you want. You come to the forefront. Again, something not possible 4 or 5 years ago. So what we end up with is this situation. And of course the last part also, not the last part, but a big part of it is, okay, what is the role of the TAs? At this point I would say to them, I sort of threw this on them in July, and I said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. What can you bring to this conversation? So I'm going to ask each of them to sort of say what were they were thinking at the time as I came to this project.
For me personally, I guess I really had to be there for the students, just to basically say breathe. Of course, this is not the traditional type of classroom environment that they're used to. Usually they like some type of hierarchy. They like to take an exam or to learn information and to kind of spit that back out. But beyond that, they're not really having a lot of discussions, arguably. So part of my role as a teaching assistant, I see as basically facilitating communication between Dr. Elavsky, but really trying to show them that we're looking bigger picture. We're trying to teach them a specific skill set that they can really take beyond the classroom throughout the rest of not only their college education, but their professional lives as well. And one interesting thing that I've seen happen is, you know, sometimes we'll lecture about readings and stuff, and we'll see texting or we'll see sleeping. But the day that we ask them, how do you want to represent yourselves to the Czech Republic? What television shows do you identify with? We kind of saw a spark come on for our students. When you give them the opportunity to really take the floor and talk about what's important to them or how they're identifying themselves, you really see the classroom develop in an amazing way. So after we have a student that raised their hand and said, keeping up with the Kardashians, and we just go like this, and we say, you know, well, how do you want to present yourself? Are we talking about stereotypes of American culture, or are we really talking about ourselves and making this individual? So now what we're seeing is we're kind of past that discomfort with the use of the technology. We're seeing them really get excited about this and really interacting with one another in a way that I haven't seen happen before. So I would, to anyone here, I would just suggest that, of course, a teaching assistant is not necessary to use these types of technology or to get your students to engage with one another. But I'd like to think that my role is important. I realized what I just said. But yeah, you really need a teaching assistant. I'm going to end it there before I
well, thanks, Janelle. When I came into it, my main goal, I think, was to break down the idea of the TA as the graduate student that sits in front of the class and just stares at them and does basically nothing in their eyes. And I wanted to get them into the space where they could see dialogue with the professor and with us as an integral part of the course, because once they get into the class and they're expecting to write things down and get the notes from the source and not even question it, just write them down, you know, wait for the test, read the notes again, take the test, and forget about them. You know, getting to the idea of dialogue with us and with Dr. Elavsky was crucial in how I understood my role in the course, because when you get them to talk, you know, about how they want to see themselves or what they think of other cultures or how they see you know, societies differ in many different ways. I think then you get them to use their brains more than just to write things down and hope for the test to have exactly what they wrote down from the lectures. So,
and I'll say this too, that David is from Romania, which is of course a post-communist country in the region, although we're dealing with Czech Republic, and this becomes very important after this next slide. So we have everything all set up. We put the time in order. End of February, students in the Czech Republic are ready to come online. We spent the first 5, 6, 7 weeks working with the textbook to sort of get them in the idea, here's how you compare media, here's how you work, some you know, important themes to think about. After spring break, we're ready to go. Sounds good. This is what the idea is. We have the real world, we have emergent collaborative learning in there, students are participating, instructors are participating, and importantly enough, teaching assistants are also part of this, so that we see this idea, we're all set to go. This is not only going to be us in the classroom, this is going to be a situation where they're really going to get an opportunity to learn, and then this happens. Oops. 300,000 students decided to walk out in the Czech Republic.
okay.
And guess why? Because they're protesting this crazy idea called tuition. Have you heard of it? Right? They're going to have to pay $1,000 a year. And what do? They decide that's crazy. More importantly, though, it's not about tuition. It's about corporate interference in education. And the idea that somebody from a corporation, sorry, don't mean to do that, but the point is they're asking these larger questions. What exactly, I'm biting the hand that feeds, what exactly does this mean? Because we've had a different understanding. So what they do is they walk out, and suddenly Tomasz contacts me and says, I don't think I'm going to have a class this semester, because this isn't going to be resolved. And they're out there. What are they doing? Well, they're not breaking stuff. They're doing teach-ins where they've taken over theaters and talking about what the students should do. I'm thinking, oh my God, what an opportunity. Can you get them to come and talk to us? He's like, I can't get them to come. Okay, my semester goes on. What am I going to do? Okay, so we have to suddenly think. I waited for 2 weeks to see what might be possible, and we realized ultimately, I said to him, I have to pull the plug. If this isn't going to be the case, I have to pull the plug. And ultimately, that's where they're at. They're still protesting today. There's going to be reforms. There's actually being a decision made later this week whether they're going to cancel the semester. And so we've got to go on. So I've set up this wonderful hype. What do? Well, now we have to rearrange the template. But it doesn't mean we lose the mission. And here's where David and myself and Janelle have had to think on our feet and try to utilize this in a very important way. We're not necessarily going to be able to speak with the Czech students, but having lived there for 20 years, I can do a heck of a lot for bringing in their perspective. I speak Czech. That was another thing I forgot to tell you. I've actually been making the students learn Czech as a part of their cultural sensitivity because, if you're not used to speaking to a foreign speaker, broken English can kind of frustrate you. So I said to them, well, let's just start learning a little Czech until you're maybe a little more sensitive. They were very much sensitive. They were much more sensitive. I'm teaching them fun words like, wine and coffee, and they didn't want anything of it. So clearly they were ready to be sensitive. What we had to do here is we had to think about what we can do. Well, the media is still online. So I will be the one that will facilitate the ways in which they will engage the media. I have movies, I have television shows, we have all the access so that ultimately I have to stand in for the Czech people who are supposedly going to be their colleagues. We have to think about the ways in which technologies can now enhance that. So the idea that Facebook and Breeze is still a part of it because Adobe allows us still to record lectures. Some of the people I've asked to do lectures have agreed still to do them. What we've ended up doing is using Space in a different way. Now, this is the point where I was like to say, this is what it looks like. But last week is when I found out that this was falling apart. So what we have now is basically an invitation for you to come back because we're set to run this for all of next year, both in the fall and in the spring. And the space that we have currently is where I am putting in for the Czech students ideas of culture, ideas of media, ideas of history, ideas of social relationships. And I'm trying to raise that bar so that they feel there's someone that they can bounce it off of. And of course, David's experience growing up under the Romanian system is a wonderful way to augment what I'm able to do in this sort of broken situation. What we're doing is we're reconfiguring the collaborations. The students are still working in groups. So what they're doing is they're posting on Space these ideas of representations. And when we can't speak to our Czech colleagues, Janelle had this fantastic idea. Let's speak to each other. So on Mondays and Wednesdays, I end up talking to them about some overarching ideas for the class, and then Wednesdays and Fridays, we sit down in a circle, just like in my son's kindergarten, and we talk. What did you think of the way they represented Americans? What did you think of the way they represented Americans? How did you think that relates to my representations of the Czech Republic? How would they differ in Romania? What types of media? And of course, they're able to do so much with Spades, which next year I'll have an upgraded presentation to show you. And ultimately, the point becomes that, okay, we didn't necessarily move forward, but it doesn't mean we lose the mission and the goal. And we have to take that into account. Now, why do we even bother to do these types of things, right? Well, it's because there's a bigger agenda. Thankfully, my department is behind me. One of the things they were very, very encouraged in is making this course not just a virtual course, but a real course, where I would take students after they had engaged one another to meet each other. And the embedded programs have allowed me to do that. This year, unfortunately, because of the funding situation that's going on, I'm only taking a small group as I've done in previous years. Next spring, I'm scheduled to take 20 students, and we will go during spring break, and we will actually attend their lectures, and they will attend my lecture, which I've been asked to give, hopefully in English. I could do Czech, but it would be very funny. Maybe not, I don't know. So we have this whole embedded program which is set to go up. My advisors and bosses have said they would like to do a 6-week summer program over there, which would be sending more Penn State students over there. And then ultimately the goal is to set up an exchange program with the university. So we see this long term. We're going to be going over in spring 2013 with honors travel, so that will be the case. And of course, more importantly is the development of professional links. So all of the travel component is not just let's go and see Czech Republic. What I've done is I've gone to all of my media friends at Sony and at Google and at various companies in the Czech Republic and said, hey, could we come visit you and talk to you? And when we've come, I'm very proud to say that the students have generally been given an hour and a half and generally have stayed more because they all have said, wow, your students are really smart. Like they really get it. They get, so we had an IT guy who was asking really great questions at Google. And we had individuals who were interested in advertising asking really good questions at Ogilvy. And all of them said, well, if we could get students like that, we could do internships. That would be fine. So of course my internships department is very excited about this, and we hope to eventually, we almost placed somebody last year, the first one, but they were actually going to be doing translated work on the major news station in Central Europe, The idea is to continue to build that. The summer courses I've already talked about, the exchange program, are things that we have to do administratively because we all know that Penn State is a little bit reluctant to move forward really quickly. Why do it? Here's the pragmatic. It's bureaucracy, I understand. Why do it? And this is where I want to finish up, but ultimately, you know, the goal with the TAs is that also Janelle will be joining me this year as we go abroad. Chinjarai, who's sitting in the back, if you raise your hand up real quick, has gone twice with me as well. Integral part of understanding. As a matter of fact, it's really wonderful, but I want to say this just as hats off to him. He's actually said to me, we're going to vet the people this year that are going to make sure that they understand this is a privilege, not a right. And I really like that idea of that thinking. They're not going over there like they do oftentimes, and you know, it's like Penn State in wherever, Venice, where you all party and you hang out together. This is about engaging people in their own setting. And the goal is ultimately to bring them over here, but I don't know if we're going to be able to do that next year, a group of Czech students that would come here and see preferably the blue-white game in that weekend, which I think would be a really interesting introduction. We'll see if that happens. Here's what I want to leave you with, and then I want to open up the conversation for the last 15 minutes, and we'll have the TAs add some final thoughts. What we're looking for in terms of pragmatic and philosophical outcomes. Well, certainly the pragmatic in terms of technology goes back to what Janelle said, which is to say the students, when you tell them this is a skill set, Google Docs or Space or the ability to understand Facebook beyond their own sort of narcissistic inclinations, you begin to see that they are rethinking practical skill sets that can be useful in their own job search. It's professional development. They don't want to think of it that way, but I can tell you already I've had friends of mine, well not, they're graduates, who have gone on and have said, wow, the ability to organize people around Google Apps has been so important for me being successful in my job. And I learned it in your class in 110. Now you didn't really learn it from me, you got started, and you went on and you did it. That's what we're trying to say. Pragmatically, technology, and as I've said to Chris and Stubbs, who has been very, very helpful also from TLT here, and Cole, I'm your guinea pig. You have a new technology, let's try it. Let's make it work. You know, I think I'm not the one who knows it, and I'm happy to be mocked for not knowing it. At the same time, too, I'm ready to take, and this is the important aspect that we all understand in this room, meaningful engagements that are facilitated through technologies. And that's what we want to do, right? So technology, also the idea that they have this reconfigured understanding of media power. Yes, globalization has allowed us all to check in, but how often do we check into a Czech news site? How often do we check into the BBC? We don't. Well, we understand that if you're seeing something happen in America, now's an opportunity for you to hands-on find out an alternative source of information. So philosophically, it's about breaking down those boundaries. The class, of course, opens up in a new way, so that it's not just about us lecturing and talking. I mean, we've gone well beyond that, but it's about saying, how do I become a part of this process where we together learn, all of us learn, and I'm not sure where this is going, and I often need David to help me with technologies, and I'm okay with that. And if you need help, I can help you out too. That's the way it goes. And if you can't accept that, well, you got to reconfigure your ideas of authority. We're all in this together. And I'm excited by your excitement, and that's what we come back to. And of course, lastly, philosophically, I think we're all invested in this idea that put here, keep us stretching our potential to advance progressive conceptions of the classroom, and most importantly, relevant bodies of knowledge that bridge all of our needs, Czechs, us in the room, Americans, for the 21st century. What I'm hoping to bring around, again, through the instruction is my own ability to move up and think about how I teach and how we use these technologies so that I don't become one of those people who says at the end, and yeah, I should actually, this is a good point for me to put it in. I had a colleague of mine and a friend of mine who told me he didn't understand why I would spend a full day at a teaching conference, meaning today. So there's a lot of entrenched issues that we still have to fight against, and I stand behind this because I feel like what we're doing is absolutely important. You can put the bells and whistles in, you can stand up there and you can lecture, but the real teaching happens, in my opinion, when we engage all of us in the same goals, which is to say, where are we going? So I leave it with this. Why to do it? And this was my response to him yesterday. Because engaged, invested, innovative education matters, in my mind, for us as instructors, for the students in their development, for the better possibilities of our world. And that goes for the fact that, as I've said, you know, you teach 300 people. If you reach 2 people, I'm fine with that. That's all I need. I don't need to convert the world. But I've had people who have said to me it's worth it. So thanks for your interest. Let me simply leave it to some final words with David and Janelle in terms of where we're at and where we're going, and then we'll turn it over to you guys for questions or comments or clarifications if it wasn't that way. Janelle, would you want to add anything?
I would just like to underscore Dr. Elavsky's point about not necessarily renegotiating the space of the classroom, but really reconsidering what your role as an educator is. Beginning as a graduate student, I truly thought that my role as a teaching assistant was to make his life easier, and I hope that I do that, but now I'm opening up my eyes and seeing, of course, that a little bit more of myself that I give to the students, whether it be by sharing my experiences or just being there if they need help with the technology, I see kind of a reciprocal arrangement where they, in turn, really want to give a little bit more back to me. So now what we're seeing in the classroom is students that typically sit in the back with their hat on and their head down, we see their hand being raised. And it's really, really awesome to be a teaching assistant in this environment and to see some students coming to life in a way that we really haven't been able to see before. So I would just let you know that if you're interested in any of this, all three of us, I think, would be here to help you facilitate any of this within your own classroom. And I think it's a really powerful and amazing tool to be used, and I would highly encourage it.
Obviously, this is a conference that relies heavily on technology, but I think that technology is a great tool that you can use when you have the great mindset to use it. So if you have a fantastic tool like Space, but you don't, you just say, oh, now I have Space, I'm going to use it in my classroom just because I'm going to put in under my resume that I use technology. You have to have the mindset behind it. You have to want to use it for a great purpose. You want to have the idea that you want to open up the classroom, you want to bring discussion into it, and you want to make the students feel like they're not just in another classroom, waiting for the clock to hit 05 so they can leave. It's about taking that tool and putting it to use for something that's greater than just the 55 minutes or the 125 minutes that you're in the classroom. I think that's important, and that's what I took away from being part of this class and as a teaching instructor.
Great. Last things I'll say is that for me, I've always said, like, let's do this. Go on off David's point, let's do this. And then, again, Chinjarai has been absolutely influential in my thinking. Like, yeah, that's good, but what about this? Whoa, okay, what a great idea. How can we make it work? Well, I think we could do this. And the next thing you know, my ideas have shifted because I'm open to that. And I think that's been absolutely essential for how I'm growing. Same thing with the people at TLT. And also why we're at this conference, right? To pay attention to each other, to say, like, okay, if I put that in, that would really work well. So I thank you for your time and your patience and your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions. We're happy to it. And again, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
If you looked at how to handle the cultural problems, you say Czech Republic, Italy, and Tunisia at the same time, they're all in the same time zone.
Yep.
But noon is not the same time.
Right, exactly.
And how do you work that out?
I think this was...
models, or how do you...
That's the long-term goal. Actually, it's ironic you should say that. Tomáš Trompeta, because of his post-communist experiences, my colleague in the Czech Republic, is actually an advisor to Tunisia and Egypt now for their new media systems. So he's actually, one of the reasons why we had trouble putting this together was because he was flying down there after the revolutions to tell them that you can't just, throw everybody away. You got to make this work. And so what the goal was for us to try and find students that would be willing to come and talk along those relationships. I think the way for me to get around it is it's not directed in the sense of we're all going to meet at one time and chat. It's here are the groups, you're in groups of 5. In the course of this week, organize what times work for you. And again, as I'm finding out from even grad students and undergrads, they're up at all hours of the night and whatnot, so that the situation is such, you're not supposed to talk for any specific hour or 2 hours, but get in these small chats that allow you to open up the conversations, expand them through space, reflect on that, and then come back, and ultimately do it in a way that's short and baby steps. And my goal is eventually to have, again, I have my colleague Bu Zhang is here. I'd love to do something in China. Bu, thank you. And there are others, Amit Schechter, colleagues that were fortunate enough who come with tremendous connections to international sites that would allow us to say, okay, here's a model that's working. Could we make this work? And then we could go from there. So I mean, I think for me, choosing one country was a way to say, let's see if we can get this off the ground. And as you can see, we're already struggling in some relationships. Did you have a follow-up?
I had an experience many years ago having a student in Norway and one in Italy, and they're supposed to get together at 5 o'clock in the evening. Well, 5 o'clock is the middle of they're going back to work for Italy, and it's the end of the working day for Norway, so there was no way we could get the groups. There was no common time for the people to get together and chat. So I created it, but in the end I used email because that seemed to be the best way to solve the problem.
Absolutely, and what the beauty is that they're all so wired today that oftentimes you can just say, you know what, you can even figure it out through your mobile phones how you're going to meet up and do this. And of course, they're posting stuff from the idea was to post stuff from Friday nights up to space, so you can see like Sam did, home and school, and the ways in which it becomes more personalized, so that the idea that they would make the investment to say we have to meet up for this It's very important that's organized. And smaller groups allow it to be a little bit more handy than, say, 50 of us are going to talk at this time. I guess that's my answer, and I'll let you know next year how it works out. Yes? Well, optimum would be less, I think. I have 50 at the moment, and they have 50. So the groups, we did 10 groups of 5. That was the goal. I'll have 20 in the spring of next year. I don't foresee that all the time. The goal is eventually, you know, with my department for Boo and myself and Anthony and others, to be able to take that 419H, which is the honors section, which provides a lot of opportunities that the others don't. But I don't see it as too much of a problem because of precisely my point. If we can organize the students and sort of give them an impetus to do it on their own, I think that will be a way that we can facilitate it. And it won't be perfect. But I think the optimum, I mean, we'll do it with 300, I'll tell you that. No way will I do it with 300. But I think 40 or 50, we're going to try. Push them out. No, go ahead.
Oh, I just thought of such a opportunity actually missed maybe to not have the class. But have you given up on running it this semester?
No, well, the idea is I continue to push to get anyone from the student base that would come and talk to us, especially about the protests.
Yeah.
Especially about the protests. And of course, the students that we take over there will actually meet them and have an opportunity in a pub or in a cafeteria to sit and talk about this. The question is if I can get in some way the faculty over there to entice these people to come and talk to people about the protests that they really have no investment in. It would have been easier if we were already connected. Absolutely, I haven't given it up. And I don't care if it's next semester. We'll start out with this conversation of protest. And we'll talk about why they did what they did in the experience of whatever the outcome is. Because it's a wonderful way to teach a teachable moment. To say, you know, again, to raise the idea of a corporate university is crazy. Here, over there, it makes sense, right? And that's, I think, a really important point. So no, I haven't given up. I struggle in some sense. There's a revolution going on, and I'm over here.
Yeah, no, but because you have the social media, like somebody tweeting, or have you thought of like sending somebody even
I hadn't actually.
from embed, because we've seen like people embedded Iraq even in Afghanistan and report live.
That's a great idea.
Well, yeah, and that was going to be part of my question was why don't you just set up a Facebook group that they could join, that people could join. They don't have to necessarily be at that university, right?
Yep. Yeah.
The Czech students could actually join rather than,
Right.
you know, and they could post the pictures and.
Great idea. I hadn't thought about it. We had a
You get
Facebook
some of
group
that.
for the 2 of the classes.
Maybe
but not open.
your faculty collaborator over there could at least, I mean, I find it hard to believe that he can't get in contact with any of the students or even any students at all. I mean, it doesn't even need to be in the class, right? I mean, just get a few of them into the group and then they might share the group around.
And this has been my struggle over spring break, where I actually got to the point where I was calling, thanks to Verizon, to him personally, saying, hello, hello, hello. You know, watching my bill go like this, right? Because I need direct access. I love the ideas, and I'll let you know how I make out at the end of the semester, because I think it's a good way to go, especially to open it up to people beyond the class. Very good point, yes.
We know that worldviews are pretty incomparable. They change for class, maybe, to a degree where they can perform for your class.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you've considered, or are you tracking these students later? Because I'm convinced now, I'm relatively new at Penn State, but I worked internationally for 20 years, and I'm convinced now that we need to do more progression and longitudinal understanding of worldview changes, not just one class. So what is your thought on it?
Absolutely agree with you. And I've seen students who have been really excited by the ideas, and then 2 years later in the professional world, they end up being people I don't really want to know, to be honest with you. So I totally understand where you're coming from. One of the ways we dealt with this is the idea of opening up an actual sort of alumni Facebook page. And this has worked very successfully for instance, in my COMM 110 class, where I have about 250 students and there's over 500 members in the Facebook page, continually collaborating, sending back information. So what my goal is, ultimately, is to be able to create especially when you get to groups of 20 traveling, 30 traveling, these conversations going. And again, Chinja or I can speak to this perhaps afterwards if you like, but one of the things that was so fascinating was making that physical relationship. When we went over there and met the people that we had been talking with all the semester, those relationships have gone on. So that when we see on their Facebook page that there's something happening or they're traveling, students from America who met them are like, okay, you can come and stay with us. You can do this. So again, I don't set my sights too high because I think I get depressed when I think about this exact same thing. I want to say that we're all going to be in the same mindset. I totally understand. That's why I put at the end of the slide, even if we reach just 2 or 3 people, I think we can continue to build something that's good. And I think for me to track that is this Facebook opportunity for them to allow them, not for me to do it, but for them to say, how is it meaningful, and let's keep it moving forward. Getting people to come and take the class, getting people to travel, and open up the conversations beyond me. Basically, I think that's it.
We also do that through a club that we're in the process of being recognized right now. It's called Czech Things.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
No cliches.
Of Penn students, and actually, Chinja has been great in facilitating communication with me. So our program is very intimate, and we're lucky for that because graduate students kind of get the word out, and then we work with students, and we do stay in touch with them. So I think that we've been really successful in that respect.
And I'm open to suggestions. If you have any ideas coming back, if you think there's things that could work. I mean, at this point now, there's so many trajectories that it's going in. But the long-term goal is it, right? The idea for them, 15 years to go off. I have one student right now who took the class a couple of years ago and is now working in the State Department. I'm just like, awesome. You know, I need that mindset to be there. So one person at a time, you know, little drops in the water. That's what it is. But I'd love to hear your suggestions if you have any. Yeah.
I love the little comment that you made about requiring them to learn a little bit of Czech.
Yes.
I think one of the greatest parts of my experience in Germany was what I learned about how I should respond to people who are speaking their second or their third language not quite as well as I would like them to, right?
Yes.
So it uncovered in me a kind of prejudice that I had. So I'm wondering, is that just sort of a quick little thing that you throw in there to suggest to them that they should be a bit more humble, or is there also a way that you could think about using that as the stepping stone to then actually encouraging them to, by the end, at least be able to have some kind of, you know, pidgin conversation in Czech, rather than just sort of using it instrumentally as a way to get them there?
Yeah, that is the goal. Again, it's one of, you know, it's something that I think would detract too much from the class's comparative media system if I focused on it.
Right.
But I did give them quizzes on it, so I made them learn it. On the other hand, I love the idea for those who are going to possibly be able to travel with us, absolutely make it central to that, and certainly for their own well-being. But the idea of doing that, especially when we have a summer course over there, when we have these, I see that as essential, because precisely your point, right? When you suddenly understand how hard it is to think in their language, and how hard it is to understand even pronunciations, they have sounds we don't have, ultimately they become much more sensitive to the ways in which they're talking to you, at least we hope. Right? At least we hope. So thank you for that affirmation.
Okay, that'll be all the questions for today.
We can talk if you'd like afterwards. Come on, talk.
And
Thank you very much.
Round of applause.
We'll see you next year with your results. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you.